Hi, we're going to take the time to review development of self-authorship. This chapter 16, describes the concept of self-authorship, the growth and transformation of an individual's construct, meaning of life experiences. This concept has become instrumental in understanding college students' ability to make meaning of the world and how they show up in it. This has everything to do with an individual's ability to self-author, write one's own life. College students are often not prepared for the complexities of adult life after graduation, but higher education institutions, faculty, and staff members can prepare them through intentional advanced learning opportunities. To better understand self-authorship, we will examine the theories of Robert Kegan and Marcia Baxter Magolda. So let's define some words that we will be using consistently throughout this lecture. Self-authorship is defined as the internal capacity to define one's beliefs, identity, and social relations. Meaning making is defined as the process of how persons construe, understand, or make sense of life events, relations, and themselves. Individuals who are self-authoring consider multiple perspectives, reflect on their own values and motivations, and utilize goals and perspectives that are internally grounded and evaluated as a foundation for meaning making. One of the theories that we will be looking at is Kegan's theory. And the focus of this theory is the evolution of consciousness, the personal unfolding of ways of organizing experiences that are not simply replaced as we grow, but included into a more complex systems of minds. Now, this growth process that Kegan refers to involves movement through 5 complex ways of knowing. These are continuous shifts from periods of stability to periods of instability, leading to ongoing reconstruction of relationships between persons and their environments. So he offers us these forms of mind where he also gives us some challenges and as well as some support that we can consider along each of these orders. So order 0, most common in newborns ages 0 through 18 months. They're living in an objectless world, a world in which everything sensed is taken to be an extension of the infant. Now, support looks like this. Parents must remain constant as the child pushes against them to determine where the boundaries are between itself and the environment. Order 1. Individuals in order number 1, they're around or approximately 2 years of age, and they realize they have control over their reflexes and become aware of objects in their environment as independent from themselves. So their thinking tends to be fantastic and illogical, and their feelings impulsive and fluid, and their social relating egocentric, in that they are attached to whatever or whoever is present at that moment. So parents should support their children's fantasies while challenging them to take responsibility for themselves and their feelings as they begin to perceive the world realistically and differentiate themselves from others while moving towards order number 2. And order number 2 has the name instrumental mind. And those in this order are able to construct doable categories. That's classification of objects, people, or ideas with specific characteristics. And as a result, their thinking becomes more logical and organized, their feelings are more enduring, and they relate to others as separate and unique beings. In this order, individuals develop a sense of who they are and what they want. There's a sense of competition and compromise, a characteristic that precedes the theme of order number 2. Now, how you can support someone in this order requires confirmation of the person that the child has become. And a challenge is to develop further involves encouragement to take into consideration the expectation, needs, and desires of other people so that it's not just about themselves. Order number 3, socialize mind. This is cross-categorical thinking, the ability to relate one durable category to another. In this order, where thinking becomes more abstract, individuals are aware of their feelings and the internal processes associated with them, and they can make commitments to communities and people and different ideas. Because of their acceptance by others is critical and crucial in this order, individuals pay attention to how others will perceive them. And how they can be, an individual in this order can be supported is found in mutually rewarding relationships and shared experiences, while the challenge takes the form of resisting codependence and encouraging individuals to make their own decisions and establish the independent lives. Order number 4, self-authoring mind. In this order, self-authorship is the focus. Individuals have the capacity to take responsibility for the ownership of their internal authority and establish their own sets of values and ideologies. Relationships become a part of one's world rather than the reason for one's existence. Support at this stage is evident in acknowledgement of the individual's independence and self-regulation. Order 5, self-transforming mind. In this order of consciousness, individuals see beyond themselves, others, and systems of which they are a part of to form an understanding of how all people and systems interconnect. They recognize their commonalities and interdependence with others. Relationships can be truly intimate in this order, with nurturance and affiliation as its key characteristics. Now, while going through these forms of mind, Kegan points out that while going through these complex forms of growth, that individuals may need to be placed in a holding environment. And a holding environment doesn't physically confine or restrict an individual, but rather serving as a bridge from one order of consciousness to the next. And this holding environment carries out 2 functions. 1, supporting individuals in their current stage of development, while 2, encouraging individuals to move to the next level. Now, Michael Ignelzi, who's the author of Complex Cases of Student Affairs and professor of student affairs and higher education at Slippery Rock University, he provides us with strategies to apply Kegan's theory within the higher education context. 1, value and support students' current way of thinking. 2, provide structure and guidance in taking on unfamiliar tasks. 3, encourage students to learn from each other by working together in groups. And 4, acknowledge and reinforce students' successes in moving to a self-authored perspective while recognizing the challenges that are required to do so. And these suggestions also reflect Kegan's idea of an effective holding environment. Now let's turn our attention to Marcia Baxter Magolda. She conducted some early research that focused on the epistemological development of 101 Miami University students during their college years. She then followed a subset of 39 of these students during their 20s and 30 of the 39 into their 30s. And from this study, she developed a model of Epistemological Reflection that was the precursor to her theory of self-authorship. And so from this research, she noticed that students are not equipped with self-authorship and prepared for life outside of the college experience, but it's something that has to be nurtured and developed, and that the higher ed institution and leadership and various staff members can take the lead in regards to helping those students equip themselves, helping them to write their own journey. So Baxter and Magolda defines self-authorship as the internal capacity to define one's beliefs, identity, and social relations. And there are 3 questions that are answered in this theory and this process. 1, how do I know? 2, who am I? And 3, how do I want to construct relationships with others? So Baxter Magolda defines epistemological reflection in her model as the assumptions about the nature, limits, and certainty of knowledge. This model contains 4 stages with gender-related patterns reflected in the first 3 stages. Stage 1, absolute knowing. Stage 2, transitional knowing. 3rd stage, independent knowing. 4th stage, contextual knowing. So the first stage, students view knowledge as certain. They view instructors as authorities with the answer, and the purpose of evaluation is to reproduce what one has learned so that the instructor can determine its accuracy. Well, Baxter Magolda found that there are 2 patterns within this stage: receiving knowledge and mastering knowledge. When it comes to receiving knowledge, it involves minimal interaction with instructors and emphasizes on comfort in the learning environment, relationships with peers, and ample opportunities to demonstrate knowledge. And women tend to be more prone to operate in this space than men. Then there's mastering knowledge, which is characterized by a verbal approach to learning, a willingness to be critical of instructors, and an expectation that interactions with peers and instructors will lead to the mastery of knowledge. The second stage, transitional knowledge. This involves an acceptance that some knowledge is uncertain, a realization that authorities are not all-knowing is a turning point from absolute knowing. Transitional knowers expect instructors to go beyond merely supplying information to facilitate an understanding and application of the knowledge. So within this stage, there is interpersonal knowing and impersonal knowing. Interpersonal knowing, used more by women than men, is characterized by interaction with peers to gather and share ideas, valuing a rapport with instructors to facilitate self-expression. Impersonal knowing is used more by men than by women, and it involves a desire to be forced to think, a preference to debate as a vehicle for sharing views, an endorsement of evaluation that is fair and practical, and the use of logic and research to solve uncertainty. The third stage, independent knowing. Students view knowledge as mostly uncertain, and the instructor's role for the students shifts to providing the context for knowledge exploration. Students value the instructors who promote independent thinking and the exchange of opinions. This stage includes inter-individual and individual patterns. Inter-individual knowing, used more by women, places value on one's own ideas as well as the ideas of others, while individual knowing, used more by men, also values interchange with peers and instructors, but more attention is given to the individual's own thinking. Then we have the fourth stage, contextual knowing. This reflects a convergence, a merging of the previous gender-related patterns, meaning that both genders are operating in this space. And while the individuals still construct a point of view, the perspective now requires supporting evidence. And the role of the instructor now involves the creation of a learning environment that endorses contextual application of knowledge, discussions that include evaluation of perspectives, and opportunities for mutual critiques by students and instructors. So there's more engagement, there's more role that the student is playing in this learning environment, but the instructor is also endorsing the application of this knowledge that is being shared and exchanged. Baxter-Magolda identifies 4 phases in the journey towards self-authorship, which involves moving from external self-definition to internal self-definition. And this path consists of 4 phases. Phase 1, following formulas. Young adults follow the plans laid out to them by external authorities about what they should think and how they should accomplish their work. Although they frame these formulas to sound like their own ideas. Likewise, they allow others to define who they are. And sources of external formulas include societal expectations, adults with whom they interact, peers, parents, significant others, and mentors all have influence. Not having a clear sense of self makes it difficult to determine what to do, both personally and in relationships. Phase 2, crossroads. Individuals progress along their journey, and then they discover that the plans they have been following do not necessarily work too well, and they need to establish new plans that better suit their needs and interests for where they are at the moment. They also become dissatisfied with how they have been defined by others and see the need to create their own sense of self. A clearer sense of direction and more self-confidence marks the end of the crossroad phase. Phase 3, becoming the author of one's life. Similar to Kegan's 4th order of consciousness, this phase is characterized by the ability to choose one's belief, and they stand up to them in the face even conflicting external viewpoints. So even if someone's not agreeing with them, they still stand up against this. After choosing their beliefs, individuals feel compelled to live them out, which is often most difficult. But as a result of intensive self-reflection, individuals develop a strong self-concept. And individuals are also more careful in making relationship commitments to ensure that the commitment honors the self they are constructing. Phase 4, internal foundation. Young adults who successfully negotiate this stage are grounded in their self-determined belief system, in their sense of who they are, and in the mutuality of their relationships. A solidified, comprehensive self-belief and system of belief now exists for them as an individual. And at the same time, they are accepting of ambiguity, and they're also open to change. For many individuals, spirituality plays a big role in phase 4. So Baxter-Magolda interviews, as I mentioned, she was interviewing the students, and small group of the students, those participants that were in their 30s, as she continued to follow them, uncovered 3 elements of self-authorship. 1, trusting the internal voice. Involved participants realized that while they could not always control events external to them, they did have control over how they thought about and responded to these events, which led to their becoming more confident in their internal voices. And then element 2, building an internal foundation. Once individuals learn to trust their internal voices, they begin building an internal foundation, which Baxter-Magolda defined as a personal philosophy or framework to guide one's actions. And then element 3, securing internal commitments. Once the 3rd element of self-authorship has been achieved, participants felt that living their convictions was a natural and as necessary as breathing. They integrated their internal foundations with the realities that their external worlds, which led to a sense of freedom to live their lives authentically. The development of self-authorship is not a linear process, but can follow many different paths influenced by the personal characteristics of individuals, the context in which they find themselves, and the challenges and supports they experience along the way. Self-authorship enhances rather than detracts from relationships and interactions with the external world. And as people become more confident and clear about who they are able to relate to others in a more honest and open manner. Now, there are applications within the higher education context that we can apply Baxter-Magolda's research. 1, classroom and co-curricular settings to provide opportunities for active sharing of ideas and viewpoints. 2, professors can include opportunities for self-reflection. 3, advisors, faculty, supervisors of student employees, and other student affairs staff should initiate conversations that cause students to reflect on the meaning of their experiences. 4, students should be given guidance on how to develop reflective habits. And 5, students should have opportunities to get involved in meaningful activities and leadership positions, which helps to develop and enhance self-authorship. Here I provide you with a number of different resources that were used. And here are a few more references continued. Thank you for taking the time to listen to the development of self-authorship.